Hello, everybody. I'm Phil Brandt, President and CEO of AIM Employers Association, and welcome to This Week at Work.
This Week at Work is the only show about the workplace that offers you front row seats and a microphone, featuring experts in human resources and employment law to bring you practical, timely, and accurate insights so you can more effectively lead your organization. It's Thursday, February 8th, episode 265. Today, elevate your talent strategy with 3 verified demands from today's top talent. Discover what the talent pool is making their decisions based on, according to 3 times best-selling author, international speaker, and decorated former VP of talent at Chick-fil-A, Dee Ann Turner. And her recent experiences align seamlessly with the insights from the newly inked National Business Trends Survey. Tune in to stay ahead in the competitive talent landscape and access the knowledge that can transform your workplace and position your organization as a top choice for the leaders of tomorrow. All this and more on This Week at Work.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I am so excited to be here today. Of course, my co-host Bert Garland is back from California. We know how he doesn't necessarily like to be out there. Bert, welcome back. Happy to have you back on the program today. Did you have a successful trip?
Yes, there were a lot of depositions and a lot of rain out in California. Wow.
Yeah, that's been crazy to see the amount of rain they have. I tell you, they can have that rain. I've been enjoying this beautiful weather we've had in the Midwest. Today's going to be a great day as well. And back for what I think this is 2, 3, maybe 4 times. Dee Ann Turner is back with us today. Fan favorite. Dee Ann, good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me again, Phil.
We're so happy to have you. I love listening to your stories and wisdom. It's always very insightful, but we can't avoid the obvious here. The Super Bowl is this week. All right. Any picks for you, Bert or Dee Ann? Who are you pulling for, Bert?
So it's a tough one. I mean, Kansas City's the home state team, but I'm getting a little tired of the overexposure of some of their stars on the team. And I don't know, maybe I'd like to see the 49ers win this time.
Oh my goodness. Hey, Nick, just turn off his
happening
mic.
to Bert's signal. I think we're going to lose him.
Just turn him off. Turn him off. Yeah, there we go. How about you, Dee Ann? Are you a football fan?
I am. It's a tough one because I do have to say I'm not a Swiftie, but I do enjoy watching the Chiefs. But on the other hand, my father was a Joe Montana fan, so I still go back to those days and think, gosh, I'd like to see San Francisco win it too. So it's nice sometimes not to have a dog in the fight and just enjoy the game and the commercials.
Good point. Very good point.
It was a Bulldog reference.
The one thing we can all hope for, though, is there are 2 really solid teams in the game this year. I'm just hoping to see a good game.
Yeah, I suspect it will be a good game. I am pulling for the Chiefs. They're not a member of ours just yet, but we're working on that. But I'm still going to pull for them. Happy to have Kansas City back in it. I really don't care much at all if Taylor Swift's on the screen or not. That it's got nothing to do, but it's just fun to watch people get excited about it. But I do want to just say and give a quick update. Last week, I had to leave the program real quickly once it was over. And I've just seemed to have this habit, whether it's been the leadership conference or a Thursday podcast. Seems to be the day my grandchildren are always born. And my newest grandchild, Theodore Brian Brandt, is in the world today doing well. Nick, you got a little picture there. We're happy to have this little fella. He's the first Brandt that we've ever had that has really a full set of hair. Bert, he has hair, looks like you. I mean, he's just got amazing hair. It's wonderful to have him here, and he's doing well. And,
congratulations. Congratulations.
I want to thank everyone for all the kind
family.
Words they shared. Absolutely.
He's a happy little guy right away.
He is a real happy guy. I mean, he has a personality like me, Bert. I mean, what would you expect? Yeah. All right. Well, let's get on with the program. We got a poll question here that I think works out really good. And let's kick it off with the word cloud. It says, what comes to mind when you hear the term Gen Z worker? And we're going to talk a little bit about that Gen Z worker here in a little bit with Dee Ann. So that's the first question. And the second one is, in what ways does your organizations communicate culture value proposition to potential employees? So how are we communicating our culture value proposition to potential employees? And something that maybe some of us don't think about all the time on how we're communicating that. There's several options. And okay, Nick put third one in here, which is, which of the following do you believe is most effective means to communicate your culture value proposition? So how are you doing that most effectively? And in the chat, we want to hear, what are your Super Bowl picks? We want to hear that as well. All right, so that keep you busy with the chat, the poll questions, listening to Bert when he gets to be on the clock. Are you ready, Bert?
I'm ready, Phil.
Nick, let's pull that lever.
All right, it's time to look into what's trending in employment law. Lawyer, you're on the clock.
Phil, we talked a little bit about the weather earlier, and you were talking about how nice it is in St. Louis. And so with the weather changing, what does that mean?
Oh, it must be political season. I think you're going to
National-
say something about hate your neighbor
Yep.
season.
National Hate Your Neighbor season. It's no secret. I'm not revealing anything new here, that we are in a very, very divided country. It really does seem to be about 45% who are going to vote to the left, 45% who are going to vote for the right, and about 10% of the middle that typically will swing an election. And so again, we are very, very polarized, with about 1 out of every 2 people having different views. And it can create a lot of issues, not just in society itself, but of course that bleeds over into the workplace. So I do want to offer a couple of tips for trying to keep political conflict to a minimum as the election cycle heats up. Something that I've reminded people about certainly during the last presidential election, and have talked about this many times on the program and with you over the years. So, we want to make sure that these face-to-face interactions between employees don't turn into arguments in the workplace, bullying via social media. We want to try to keep political propaganda like shirts and buttons and other types of propaganda that might be offensive to some outside of work. And it's really hard because, of course, we ourselves in HR folks in organizations, they have their own political views as well. And so there may be a temptation to allow some expression of political support for one side or the other. And that in and of itself can be very destructive within the organization. And so it's very important that us as leaders, that we are able to sort of tamp this down, rein in our own personal feelings, and try to apply things very, I'm going to throw out the C word, very consistently across the organization. Yes, exactly. Yes. So I want to offer some tips for organizations. But before I do that, I want to talk about some stats that I pulled for the last presidential election. And my hunch is that it's going to probably be very, very similar during this election cycle. So 78% of employers report that they have employees discussing politics at work. That's almost 80% of employers.
I don't know what happened to, the way I was taught is these are just not things that you talk about at work, right? And I do find it difficult not to discuss them with people that I enjoy or trust. But it is a very different day than it was for me back in the 80s, when it was like, hey, you just don't talk about these things outside of the household.
Well, and again, with the very divided electorate, and it seems that almost every issue somehow turns political these days. So 47%, and this is again going to just right back to right around the 2020 election, 47% report that of employers report that the 2020 presidential election impeded their employees' ability to get their work done. That's almost 50%. 26% say the election had a moderate or big impact on their employees' ability to do their job. 33% say they spend more time consuming political news at work than they used to. 36% reported the 2020 election led them to avoid talking to a coworker because of their political views. And 31% of employees who talk politics at work report being stressed or frustrated. So keep that in mind as we head toward this new election cycle. I mean, very important issues for regarding discourse in the workplace. So my suggestion is that we have to remember that we as an organization are made up of people across the political spectrum, and not only across the political spectrum, but even within the being right or being left or being centrist, there's nuances to everybody's position these days. And so the first thing I would strongly suggest to employers is that we as the employer need to decide the company's position and then educate management to comport their behaviors. And this again is where I suggest that we need to be leaders and we need to try to tamp down discourse in the workplace. The goal of the workplace is not for political debate in most workplaces. The goal is to produce an excellent product or provide an excellent service. And that should be first and foremost for the business itself.
So Bert, let me ask you a quick question to that before you move to the next topic. So just from a legal perspective here, is there anything from a position we can say, look, it's a work rule, we don't discuss that here, or can that fall into the concerted activity side of things, depending on what you may be discussing?
Yeah, so I think there's a big difference, Phil, between somebody who wears a shirt in the workplace that says vote for Joe Biden versus somebody who wears a shirt in the workplace that says vote for Joe Biden, he's pro-union, and this company needs a union, something like that. I think you have to be nuanced about it. If the person ties the political expression to their terms and conditions of employment, then I think that becomes a little bit more protected under the National Labor Relations Act. If it is purely just a political expression, then I think that it's not necessarily protected. We also need to be mindful of state laws in this respect. And so, the first thing for employers to do really is to decide what their position is. Is the company going to be neutral? And if it is, then the company needs to be consistent about prohibiting or sponsoring, hosting, gathering, or gatherings or fundraisers for one party or candidate, not interjecting the company into social or political issues, and eliminating political media in the workplace. I think that that's really important. If the company decides that it's not going to be neutral and it is going to take a stance, then they need to be prepared for backlash, not just from their own employees, but also potentially the public. We all witnessed what went on with Anheuser-Busch and Dylan Mulvaney with their social media campaign. So you just need to be careful before wading into these issues. So I do have 5 recommendations to employers. The first is to implement a policy. We do need to be mindful of state law. In this respect, most states would allow an employer to implement a policy. And keep in mind, most employers in the private sector, employees do not necessarily have First Amendment rights to free expression in the workplace. It is a private place of employment. The second step after implementing a policy is to prohibit the use of company equipment or property to create or display material to promote or oppose any political cause. Again, we don't want people using our equipment to further their stance. The third step would be to prohibit pressure on coworkers to participate in political activities. Fourth would be to prohibit external political activity if connectable to the company. In other words, people are free to do what they want outside the workplace for the most part, but they definitely should not be dragging the company into their political expression, wearing our shirts or trying to maintain that the company is taking a position on a political issue. And then finally, train on what our policy is and warn of the disciplinary consequences for violating that policy. I think those are good steps to take to try to protect everybody on both sides of the issue. Again, keep in mind that everybody in every organization is made up of people across the political spectrum. So that's what I have for you on the first one.
Great. We're going to close out and go right on to Dee Ann here, but I want to just get to the chat, and I'm seeing some congratulations and chief votes in our chat. So thank you for all of that. Dave Forsey, always happy to have him with us, and thank you. And there was a great question about what about Let's Go Brandon shirts?
So let's go Brandon shirts to me it is an absolute political expression these days. I'm not going to cover the history of how that phrase came up. It was kind of accidental and kind of funny if you watched it, how it came to be. But let's go Brandon is a political phrase these days. And so again, that anybody who's wearing let's go Brandon shirt, you know that they're anti-Biden, not necessarily pro-Trump, but they're anti-Biden. And I think that the employer would be wise to prohibit that type of expression in the workplace.
All right. So let's revisit and make sure our dress code policies give us the space we need to keep our workplace free from these types of aggravations and distractions that some people can take very seriously and get themselves out of sorts. Bert, I'm going to have to cut you off because you've done a great job, as always, digging deep on this one. I know you have more to share, and we'll cover those items next week. And I want to get on to our 3-time bestseller, AIM Leadership Conference international speaker, Dee Ann Turner. Dee Ann, welcome back to the program. We're so happy to have you and feel very grateful and blessed to have you as part of our program and a friend of AIM Employers Association. How have you been since we've talked to you last?
Oh, doing great, Phil. It's just such a pleasure to be back with you and your members. And, it's always true. Kathy, the founder of Chick-fil-A, used to always say, he said, it's one thing to get invited one time to speak to a group, but if you get invited back the second time, that's a real honor. So I feel really honored to be back with you. Thank you.
Well, we get great feedback on the wisdom that you share. And I know pre-show you and I were talking about, just lessons and how we end up where we're at in life. And what I'd like to do is dig into some of the conversation we were having pre-show and maybe, talk a little bit about, in your experience, what is the workforce looking for from an employer today? I know you've been doing some research and work in this area and would love to get some of your insight on that. We've been talking a lot about retention in the workforce. And I think it's just a great question that plays on the back of our retention efforts that so many are trying to achieve.
Well, my first experience and research comes from raising 2 millennials and a Gen Z, young millennials and a Gen Z. So I've had lots of firsthand experience. And the funny thing is, when they become adults, you go from being so much of that parent into coach. And I can say that's my number one career coaching assignment right now, is with the 3 of those young men. Also, I serve High Point University as one of their executives in residence around talent acquisition. So, and my 3rd book, Crush Your Career, has put me on lots of college campuses and with lots of young people young in their career. And what I've come to conclude is this, and this is backed up by research as well, but this is also, I fully believe this from my observation. What we try to do as organizations is we're trying to do 80 different things. Even as I look at the answers coming into what do you think about Gen Z, and you see it's all over the place. And we're trying to do 80 different things, whether it's bring your dog to work day, or it's Friday afternoon happy hours, or all kinds of things that we're calling culture. We're trying to figure out what it is that they want in their work. I think they're just 3 things. If you do these 3 things, I think they cover the 90% of the issues. So number 1, and we can break these down. I'm going to tell you what all 3 are, and then we can break them down as you want to. Number 1 is they want to be a part of a remarkable culture. And I'd love to talk about what that means. Secondly, they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. Interesting thing about this generation, people talk about, oh, they don't work as hard and all this. That's not true. They'll work very hard for you if it's something they believe in, if it's something they feel like matters, versus just to make money for themselves or someone else. And then thirdly, and I actually think this is most important to our younger millennials, maybe even older millennials, but our millennials and our Gen Z, which is most of what we're hiring now in our organizations, they want a leader who will invest in them both professionally and personally in their development. So it's
Yeah.
those three things that these two generations are really looking for
So
as they
where
look
does
for a
pet
job and why they
insurance
stay.
come from? Where's pet insurance fit into this? Like I'm
It-
talking, they're like, well, we offer pet insurance and that's how, and it's like, I'm with you, Dee Ann. I'm like, okay, I don't think it's about pet insurance at all. It might be something you want to do, but it's not where we want to focus our attention and energy. Let's get back to remarkable culture. You mentioned that we can
Sure.
get into that. I'd like to dig into that one a little bit deeper. What does
Sure.
that mean when you say that?
Well, you're gonna notice that I like things in threes. I think that was from my mentor at Chick-fil-A. But anyway, I think there are three things there that you're really focused on, and possibly four. I'll tell you what the fourth one is. But the first one is a meaningful purpose, and so that kind of plays into that second thing about being a part of something bigger than yourself. That answers that question. The purpose answers the why question. Why do we exist? So they
Yes.
want to be a part of something that matters. Secondly, and I think this is really important for this Gen Z. I'm having a hard time with that word today. And it's early, I guess. But they want a challenging mission. They want to be a part of something that a big goal, a big, hairy, audacious goal, if you will, to achieve. And
Yeah.
they want to be challenged by that. This is a talented generation, and they want big goals to achieve. And then the third part of a remarkable culture is demonstrated core values. And you notice I use the word demonstrated. And that starts from the leaders, the ones that are on this call, all throughout the organization, because they're not demonstrated by leadership and they're just put on a screensaver or hung in a conference room. They don't mean a whole lot. So those are the three elements that make up a remarkable culture. And you might have some other things that come into that, some of the behaviors we mentioned earlier, but these are the things that matter. And even the conversation about the culture, how to communicate the culture value proposition to potential employees that you asked for a poll on. And it's interesting, of all the things I read there, and I guess word of mouth kind of plays into it when I look at that. But that's going to come back again to leadership. And that's why I'm so glad that our organizations are spending more time in person than virtually, because that has to be caught, not just taught. And it's caught by spending time with the organization and really seeing what goes on and what leadership demonstrates.
Those are fantastic. I'm aligned 100% with everything you just said. And one of the things that I continue to emphasize to organization is obviously it starts at the top and it starts with leadership, but having extremely effective like managers and supervisors, those people who are in conversation with the direct workforce in the masses, because they're the reflection of the leader when it comes to that. So I may not get exposure to the leader frequently, and I might see and hear the dream or the vision when you start talking about something bigger than yourself, but being able to pass that down throughout the organization so it's caught. I really like that one, and not taught. We talked a little bit about mentoring and those types of things, and maybe employees staying for 2 or 3 years in the workplace. How or why is that important in your mind?
Well, that is what's kind of expected out of this generation now, is they're only going to be in a job a couple of years. And so if you get 5 years out of them, you really accomplish something. So how do you do that? Well, one of the most important pieces is that mentoring piece, that investing in them personally and professionally. So let me talk about that for a moment. I was working with an organization last week. It's a nonprofit, and they hire licensed professionals, licensed counselors for their organization. And they're having a hard time finding them. And so I asked them what they were offering, and they were talking about, and they said, one of the things we tell them is they get free housing. I said, free housing at a nonprofit so for confidentiality reasons, I'm not saying a whole lot, but it's a residential situation. And these people want to be free. They want to be free to do what they want to do. And all of a sudden, free housing feels confining. I'm going to live here. Now, it might be okay. It might be a neutral, but it's not the thing to sell. What you want to sell to this group is what they need to get their full licensing is they have to have mentors. So
Hey,
instead of
Dan,
worrying
after
about
this, I got to get the name. I got some kids that might need some free housing. I can tell you that now. So afterward, when we're off air, you can help me out.
well, it might be a plus, but what they really want is this investment of leadership into their
Yes.
professional growth. Okay, I want to talk about personal too. I'm going to come back to that. But this professional growth, they want this leadership to invest in them. So that's what I was telling them. You've got to play that up. You've got to have a mentor for each one of these people, and it has to be a set program. And then you end up keeping people longer because we know the reason that people leave or stay for an organization, the number one reason is the effectiveness of their leader.
Right.
And so that can help. Let's talk about this investing personally, because I saw this pop up in the poll on the wordgram of the things that describe this generation. Anxious. Now, that's a good example of investing. If you can help somebody be less anxious, you can work on that about them personally. How much more effective will they be in their job and a future effective leader? Just to work on that one issue when you identify that in one of your team members. So, and that's life-changing. That's transformational when you decide to invest in helping somebody in that way. So
hey,
that's,
if I
go
can
ahead.
cut you off, because I love that you went into the poll. So I just went and looked at it ourselves, and the leading response in that word cloud was entitled, right? That's the reception that sometimes my generation will feel, oh, they're entitled. But I don't really believe they are entitled at all. Do you have any perspective on how maybe we should interpret the message of entitled?
Well, I think that part of it is that it's really, it's kind of a strange juxtaposition of this generation, because on one hand, I think they're incredibly resilient. You know, they came about during 9/11. They went through watching their parents go through the financial crisis in 2008. Then they went to college during COVID. I mean, we could go on and on about this generation and what they endured. So on one hand, they're really resilient. And then they're called entitled because they haven't struggled as much from a job perspective. From the time they turned 16, they had the opportunity to have any job because there was such a shortage of hourly workers. As they've gone into the workforce, most of them, if they wanted a job when they came out of college, they didn't have a hard time finding them. When I came out in the mid-'80s, it was a problem.
Right. Yeah.
But they're not having that problem. So that appears, I think that's what appears as entitlement. They haven't really struggled. I think it's going to be pretty interesting what's going on right now. The tech sector, the banking sector, the layoffs that are occurring like they've not seen since they entered the workforce. Let me say one more thing about this generation while we're on this wordgram and talking about this. The other thing I notice about them, I mean, I love the word hope, because I have a lot of hope in this generation because they're so resilient and because they're so smart. And one of the things that sometimes people say, and I don't see that here, but sometimes they say, oh, they don't work very hard, or they're not hard workers, or they don't work as long as we baby boomers did. Well, if they worked as long as we did, there'd be something wrong, because they have tools that we didn't have. They can get things done faster than we did them. And so they do have that balance that we didn't have, but they have the tools to make work faster. So that's kind of how I view that.
Yeah, and I do. I always find it comical, and I laugh even at myself. And I maybe speak out of both sides of my mouth when I'm talking with my own children. And I, like you, I have millennials and Gen Z, and I'm like, you got to work hard. You need to have a second job. Like I'll say these things, and at the same time, I'm like, hey, keep a balance. Life is a lot more important than all of. And I'm sure they're spinning their heads, going which way. And I'm really trying to say, give it 100%. And I believe they do. I haven't worked with any of the millennials or Gen Zs today that really aren't giving it 100%. It just looks different than the way I did it.
Right.
And it's really recognizing, I think you said that really well, they go about getting to the solution differently. And maybe sometimes more smartly than I did. Like I went home with Chat GPT and I was like, hey, check this out. Isn't it so cool? And they're like, oh yeah, Dad, that's no big deal. Right. It's like, it's just, and I was so excited. And they just were like, that's everyday stuff, Dad. Where you been?
Yeah. I had the same experience.
All right, Dee Ann, tell us real quick. You always like to give things away. I know you're trying to help people all the time. And you have a special gift for people if they would visit your website. How can they maybe take advantage of the gift you want to give them?
Sure. You'll go to deeannturner.com, DEEANN Turner.com. You can download my top 25 behavioral interviewing questions. Some will apply for the jobs that you have available, some won't. But hopefully it'll be a great start for you. I not only tell you the question, but I actually give you an idea of the answers you're looking for and why. So I hope you'll find that helpful. Yes, you'll have to give me your email address, but the nice thing is I don't send many emails. In fact, the last one was March 23rd, 2023. So I am due for my annual email, but you won't get a bunch from me. So thanks so much.
That in and of itself is impressive.
That's right. That's right. But that's a great gift. I can tell you, I've seen the questions. I have not seen the answer. So I'm going to go on and get those myself because I think we can ask the right question, but if we're not listening for the right answer, that equally is as important as well. Dee Ann, it's been a pleasure to visit with you and with our members, getting a chance to hear from you and hear the success you're having with your third book. And I know if they want to reach you, they can do so by going to your website. They can download the interview questions. Bert, as always, it's been a great update from you, and to everyone that said thank you or congratulations to me for being a new granddad. I say thank you for that. I really enjoy being a grandfather because they go home. All the things people say about grandkids are right. You love them and you send them home. It's wonderful. I haven't lost a night of sleep yet. It's been wonderful. With that, we will be back here next Thursday at 7:30 Central Time. Until then, go out and let's be good to someone.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your colleagues, forward our invites, share the link, aimea.org/This Week at Work, or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment. LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, we're everywhere you are. Don't forget you can be part of the show. Send your questions and comments anytime to info@thisweek.work. We'll see you next week, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, when we discuss what's happening this week at work.